we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're gonna have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the OneIQ Football Talk podcast here for week number 2 of the NFL season. Brendan and Sterling coming back with you for another episode. My friend, how you doing on this football Saturday?
Good, man. You know, we got through week 1. We finally have football back on Sundays. It's nice to see. You know, it was a little shitty for me last Sunday because I was sick, as you all may remember from last week's podcast. But no, I'm fucking happy. We got football back. My team won. You know, if you want to, we both put up some videos this week doing a quick rundown of each of our teams. So go back and check those out. But other than that, it's good. You know. Football, baby.
Yeah, both of our teams got the win. Both of us having very different reactions to our wins this particular weekend. I think that is where we should probably start out. Again, if you want to hear our full reactions to these games, please go check out the videos. They're both up and both, I think, very well. And we're going to be doing this every single week for our teams when they play in games. Obviously, depending on which day it comes out, could be a different situation. I know for myself, I'll try to get it up a few hours after the game. Sterling has to do it a little bit later in the week, but all in all, highly recommend checking out those games. But yeah, let's start with your Steelers, man. This was a game.
It was. You know, I mean, it was. A lot of people were expecting very little out of the Steelers offense, and that is pretty much what we got. We had a great game from the defense. You know, as I said in that video, it was a very shaky first quarter in every facet of the game. You know, special teams, offense, defense, everybody just seemed to be a little out of sync. And then everything settled down in the second quarter and beyond, and that was really when the Steelers took control of this game and just shut down that Falcons offense. You know, I will say Kirk Cousins did not look like Kirk Cousins. You know, they were running a pistol offense for most of the game. I think that was to prevent him from having to drop back as far, because we know Kirk Cousins likes to play under center and do his 3 and 5 step drops. They were running that pistol, so he only had to do a 2-step drop on most of his plays. And so I think that likely threw off his rhythm a little bit and made it a little easier for the front 7 to time the snap.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins, again, he had his Achilles tear, similar to the Aaron Rodgers injury, but he had it halfway through the season. So we talked about Aaron Rodgers all last year with the potential of him coming back, and it was kind of ultimately said at the end of the year he was never going to come back. It was just kind of like a little bit of a pipe dream. But it really is just one of those things where I just wondered if Kirk was fully back to being healthy. And again, this is going to be a tough thing, especially for a 35-year-old guy. And going up against that Steelers defense was always going to be a hell of a test. And fair enough, I think the Steelers defense looked pretty decent. They looked solid. TJ Watt realistically should have had 3 sacks. I know there was a penalty on one of the sacks that you and I disagree on, the offside. I think he was just that ever so slightly offside, you know, a little bit from your side, but ended up with 1 sack, and it was the game sealing sack in that game. But honestly, the offense kind of did what the offense did, what we expected. Justin Fields was able to move the ball past the 50, but once he got to that 50-yard mark, he couldn't really do much more after that. And Chris Boswell really just was your offense.
Yeah, he was lights out kicking the ball for sure. You know, I feel like part of the movement past the 50 was Arthur Smith's play calling.
Yep.
That does need to clean up a little bit. I saw some promising situations. You know, he was running the ball, utilizing Najee Harris quite often. Um,
Didn't see as
you
much
know,
Jalen Warren.
we didn't, but he's been dealing with an ankle sprain
Mm.
ever since training camp, which is something I didn't mention in that video because I had forgotten about until I was reading another article later in the week, and I was like, that's right. Because, yeah, Jalen Warren was kind of a non-factor. He only had
I think you
two
said it was like
carries.
two snaps from.
It was 2 carries for 7 yards and 2 receptions for 13.
Mm.
So, I mean, he didn't do a whole lot. Cordarrelle Patterson was actually in the game more often than Jalen Warren, which was bizarre for me to see. Like, I at that point, if Jalen Warren's not available, I don't know why you're just not making Najee Harris the workhorse.
Yeah.
You know, sure, you've got Patterson there. Utilize him when somebody gets injured and use him on the kick returns. Otherwise, like, hand Najee Harris the ball. He's in the best shape he has been in since college, and he is running the ball like an angry beast. You know, we saw that last week. He was running over guys, and just let him do that. You know, I was like, there was one play in the fourth quarter where they went for it on fourth and short with a hurry. It was 4th and 1. They hurried it up. Nobody really looked like they knew what they were doing, which was concerning in itself why they still ran the play. And when they snapped it, Justin Fields sort of just fell on his face as soon as they snapped it. And it's like, you got Najee Harris, man. Just give him the ball and let him dive over that line. If somebody wants to try and meet him in the middle, it's going to be a coin flip as to who wins that battle. And I'm weighting that coin towards Najee Harris.
Yeah, it was again. You did a phenomenal job with the breakdown video, and I
Yeah.
highly recommend everyone go watch that video. We're making these videos a little bit just so we're not spending as much time during these sections talking about our team.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was I think what we can only describe as an interesting game for your team. The defense did what your defense did, and your offense kind of did
I,
what everyone expected your offense to do.
I would say it was a positive outcome though. The defense, you know, they showed everybody, and the secondary especially showed that it's better than what everybody was expecting. So that is good that the Steelers defense looks better than people were expecting even. And then on offense, yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't a huge stat line, but they protected the ball, no turnovers, even though there was one fumble, it was recovered. It's that's positive going forward, I think. You know, there's nowhere to go but up. The time of possession especially was a big thing. They were able to sustain drives to keep the defense off the field and let them get the rest they need so that they can stay healthy and competitive all season long. If this continues, this is a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward.
Yeah, and when you have a defense like that and you saw some promise from the offense, that's always a good thing to kind of try to build off of. It just kind of goes back to that situation of, you know, if you're a Steelers fan, you got to hope that your defense can hold the opponents to under 20 points because that is realistically the way that the Steelers are going to win games this year. Now my Chicago Bears on the other side, this was a game that I messaged you, basically all my family members texting me about like, "Oh, how you doing?" I'm like, "I need therapy. I need therapy after that game. I need therapy for a lot of things, but that was a game where I walked away and then my first thought was, this is something that I would talk to a therapist about. Just the emotional roller coaster of kind of exactly what the Chicago, like this goes back to 2006 where you have it was the Arizona coach, I think it was Dennis Green who said the Bears are who we thought they were. And that
Yep.
game was exactly what we saw from the Bears. It was defense and special teams, and the offense fizzled. Now, I think with this game, as the week has progressed, I've grown a little bit more comfortable with the result because, again, a win is a win. To me, I didn't say this in the video, but again, this was something that I felt kind of like on Thursday, Friday type situation. That was kind of the perfect game for Caleb Williams to experience in the NFL. Reason being is the last 2 years in college at USC, he didn't really have an offensive line. He only had one weapon in Jordan Addison, and then he got drafted a year before Caleb Williams, and his defense was never good. So he always felt like he had to be Superman and do everything himself. This game is telling him that he doesn't have to be that guy. He doesn't have to go
Yeah.
out there and make things happen for himself just to try to get the win. He can look at his defense and go, these guys are going to get multiple sacks, multiple interceptions every single game. Our special teams unit is well coached. They're going to be really, really good. So I don't have to be Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. I can just go out there for the first season or two while I'm still learning the NFL and just play a casual game. I don't have to be rushed. I don't have to be anything extra. I just have to go out there and play. And I think this was probably one of the best things for him. Just to sit back and go, you know what? You didn't play well. He admitted it. He admitted he didn't play well. But he can go back and go, a win's a win. And my defense is one of the best in the NFL. And I can trust them to bail me out of situations. They have my back. And again, I think this is weird for me, kind of being glass half full on a situation for the Bears, because usually I'm always glass half empty. And so I'm sure this is probably weird for you to hear me talk about this team, of going, this was, again, probably the best game that Caleb Williams could have possibly had. Now, if he would have went out there 350 passing yards, 4 TDs, I'm sure I would probably be having a much different perspective about this. But again, I'm being half glass half full.
No, and you should be. There was one word you said in there that stood out to me that describes Caleb Williams in every facet of this game, and that is extra. And that's the problem with him. That is the one thing he needs to rein in now that he realizes he has such a great built defense and team around him. He doesn't have to do the extra. We saw it where there was that one play where he gets back and he starts doing his little dancing around, spinning and twirling and trying to get away from the defense. And that defense was just right up in his face. And it was like a 19-yard sack.
Yep.
And that I think was the big moment of welcome to the NFL. You can't do that here and then throw the ball downfield for a 45-yard pass.
Yep.
That shit isn't going to fly.
It's a different league. It's a different
Exactly.
game. And again, that was another thing that I was going to talk about. Again, looking at this game, Caleb Williams didn't have any exceptional plays, but he also didn't have any super negative plays other than that 19-yard sack. There was a couple throws that he would like back, but you talk to every quarterback. There's every single game, they're like, yeah, I probably want this throw back. And again, you look at it and go, a 19-yard sack, that's not ideal. You don't love to see that. But again, if that's the worst play of his game, of his professional debut, you're going to be sitting back going, I'm going to take that. I'll happily take that.
Well, and that's what we got to remember too. Like there was a lot of expectations for him, but we've seen a lot of first overall quarterbacks. We've seen a lot of top 10 drafted quarterbacks in this league in the last 20 years. And this was the first win for a rookie quarterback since David Carr did it. He was the last one, and that was, I believe, in 2002.
Yeah.
And so, and really, like, Caleb Williams doesn't deserve to be credited with the win here. It was the defense that got this win for the team.
He
and
doesn't
as
even
you
credit
said,
himself as the win. He goes, it's 100%.
He didn't have any super positive plays, but luckily he protected the ball. He didn't turn it over. He didn't make bonehead errors, which is a good thing, because Bears fans, that would have been a big red flag, because you guys are so used to the Jay Cutlers and the Mitchell Trubisky's throwing it into triple coverage, and Justin Fields not reading properly and just throwing it away into coverage after his second read and things like that, where if he had made plays like that, then I'd say the red flags got to go up. The fact that he protected the ball is very positive. It's not great that he only was able to accumulate 93 yards. That definitely needs to improve, but I think that will improve. Yes. I think a lot of this was, he knew a lot of Bears fans had really high expectations. You said 300 plus yards, 4 TDs. I think the problem was him going into this. He's going, 90% of my fan base expects me to have a 300-yard, 4 touchdown game. I have to do this for them to make them happy. And I think that was a little bit in his head, unfortunately. And so I am glad to see some Bears fans pumping the brakes and going, okay, well, you know what? We won. We got a good defense. He didn't look terrible. There's room to grow. Because was it Nick Saban on Hard Knocks
Saying that you
with
got with Eberflus.
yeah, talking about, like this is a 3-year development plan.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be. We've even seen Tom Brady talk about it recently where, and I'm on board for this. Too many rookie quarterbacks are being thrust in the spotlight too early for them to truly see success. You don't see a quarterback hit his peak usually until 25 or 26 years old after being in the league for 3 to 5 years already. And so often guys are coming in at 21, 22 years old. They're the starter right away. And it's like, oh, they're not successful. They're not good. They're never going to be good. And that's just not true.
Yep.
The expectations are far too high because we've seen magic out of certain guys like Patrick Mahomes. And even him, he didn't play his rookie year.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of people seem to forget.
I just always boil it down to that if it's a rookie quarterback, the rookie season is always a year that you just kind of throw away.
Yep.
And again, the biggest example of this is Peyton Manning in his rookie year. He had 28 interceptions, a record that hasn't been close to being broken. You got to allow guys to adjust. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. And again, we'll talk more about both of our teams up here. But the other big news of the week ultimately happened on Thursday night, and that is Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, suffering yet another tragic concussion. And the entire sports media world that follows football, yesterday the conversation was he should just retire. And you listen again, like I was listening to a bunch of different people talk about this situation, and one of the best arguments that I heard was, if you're Tua Tagovailoa, you're a 26, 27-year-old dude, you've just gotten paid, and you're a fierce competitor. Most of these guys have been doing this since they were 6 years old. You are telling me that when he's healthy, he doesn't want to get back out there, and how hard it's going to be to walk away from it. As someone who was in a sport that was basically their entire life, having to walk away from it is a very difficult thing. But especially for concussions, because that's what happened to me with the world of boxing. I had to walk away due to concussions. And so with Tua, it's one of those things, you just continue to look at this and the way that they keep happening. Because I know you were at work, but you saw the clip of when he took that hit and he was on the ground. His arms were kind of frozen in spot again. And we've seen this. Luckily, he was able to get up on it off of his own power. That was probably the best thing that we saw. But you've had 4 major concussions over the span of less than 3 seasons. Closer to just 2, and it's just gonna get to a point where you've made good money, you signed a big deal, and you got a good signing bonus. At some point you just have to sit back and go, if this continues, the next one I might not be getting up, the next one I might not be awake, because that's the reality. And like it's one thing if it's a small concussion of where you just see 2 guys like bang shoulders and they bonk heads and they both walk off the field, and it's like, no concussion's good. But the way that he is getting his concussions, of where he is just completely out of it if he's able to get up. Like there was that one time 2 seasons ago where he slams his head into the back of the turf, gets up, starts walking, and then basically has no legs under him. That's not good. And then we saw basically his arms freeze up and he had to be stretchered off the field. We saw a similar situation with that. He had 3 concussions in 1 season 2 years ago. I don't ever want to speak for an athlete of what they should or shouldn't do, but man, as someone who's been in this position, I just look at it and go, for your health, for your family, and just for your future, it's probably best just to say, you know what, I've done everything that I could and it just didn't work out.
Well, and I mean, with the way it happened is the biggest thing for me because that was a very routine tackle. It wasn't a hard hit
Nope.
and still caused what appeared to be a pretty severe concussion. At that point, you got to look at it and go, like your brain and your body is not built at this point to be able to take any hits. What happens when you take another big sack? As you said, you might not wake up next time.
Yeah.
Like they may be stretching you off into a field and putting you into an ICU
Yeah.
because that was a very light hit and that and very routine. Like that should not be causing concussions. It makes me wonder if maybe there was a hit earlier in the game
Well, they said a few
that
plays earlier where he got his head smacked onto the
eh,
back
yeah,
turf,
and so
and
that's the my question is maybe there was already a bump that had him feeling a little dizzy and that's why that knocked him right out. But even if he hadn't got paid, like you got to look at your future. As you said, you're what, 26, 27. Like, do you want to be able to communicate with your family and friends when you're 45 and 50? When you have kids and grandkids, things like that? Because the way you're going, you're going to be drooling into a cup by the time you're 35
yeah.
at this rate, and it's just not good. Look at how it's affected people. We've seen lots of players in the past. Look at Antonio Brown. It completely changed him,
Hmm.
and we've seen other guys walk away. I was watching Manti Te'o talk about it because he's very close with Tua Tagovailoa, and that was one of the things that had him walk away early was just the concussions, and it's a strange thing I've been noticing that it seems to be a lot of those Samoan players they concuss pretty easily, it seems.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing for Tua to have to go through, and
It is.
like it's again, this is coming from someone like myself who had to walk away from a sport that they were good at and that was basically their entire life due to concussions. It was not an easy decision for me. Again, I had to go through a lot different stuff than what Tua did with post concussion syndrome and stuff like that. So I understand where he is coming from
Yeah.
and the decision that he's going to have to make, and I just continue to sit back and go, man, I just hope the decision that he makes is right and he can live with whatever decision it happens to be, because if I'm the Miami Dolphins, 2 years ago when he had his third concussion, they just said he's done for the year. We're not playing him even if he clears concussion protocol. I don't know how you put him back out there this season.
Yeah.
Like because this has just been one of those things of we talk about Pat Fryermuth and the concussions that he has had to deal with over his career, and even at one point you said it's just gonna get to a situation of where you just can't play him for the rest of the season because you're worried about whether or not he's gonna be able to continue to play.
Well, I mean that's the thing with concussions is it doesn't matter how long ago your last one was. As soon as you have your next one, they compound.
Mm-hmm.
So like you get another concussion and all those ones that you had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, like all of that comes back and it's worse each and every time. So like even with Pat Fryermuth, he hasn't had a concussion in 2.5 years. But if he gets another one, that I will be on the fence of he should hang it up now.
Yeah.
Like once you hit a certain point, it's like this is too many. You're just jeopardizing your future and your ability to be able to do anything with your life later on. And that's where two is at. And I get it. Like you said, it's hard to walk away from the game that you've done your whole life, but there are other facets of the game.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to no longer be involved in football, but for Tua, my personal opinion is he should not be putting that helmet back on.
Yeah. I look at it and I go, there are so many different opportunities with the world of football when it comes to coaching, when it comes to scouting, when it comes to management side of things,
Mhm.
hell, broadcasting. We see so many players go into the world of broadcasting. If he wants to stay around the game, he is
Yep.
100% going to be able to stay around the game. It's now just a situation of what is he going to do. But another injury that we have to talk about is the one revolving superstar running back Christian McCaffrey, placed on
Yep.
IR this morning. And this was one of those things where we walked into our fantasy draft. You and I, neither of us were particularly comfortable with the idea of taking Christian McCaffrey first overall. I know at third overall, if he was there, you were going to take Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I was never going to take Christian McCaffrey even if he was there at 4 for myself. I just had an immense amount of worry with that injury. And again, I didn't think he was going to be out. I just thought it was going to slow him down a little bit more. And the fact that he is now on IR is just makes this even worse.
Well, and I think the issue a lot of people are having with it is, why was it not designated as Achilles tendonitis initially? It was just called an ankle injury, an ankle sprain, and that's why people were like, oh, he'll be back, he'll be fine. But yeah, Achilles tendonitis in this league as a running back or a quarterback, that's something you have to take seriously, because you get in there too soon and that goes from tendonitis to a full snap.
Yeah.
That tendon will just disintegrate if you try to push it too much before it is completely healed from a tendonitis. And so that's where I think a lot of people are upset with the 49ers for not disclosing that sooner. I kind of get why you're like, well, we're hoping that it's a minor tendonitis so it'll heal faster, but unfortunately, that's something they really should have put out sooner.
Yeah, and even just going back to Monday night's game of where Matheson, the backup running back
Mason.
for the Mason
Yeah.
for the 49ers, like someone was asking him at the end of the game, "Oh, when did you find out?" He was like, "Oh, Friday." And everyone's just sitting back going like, "What do you mean you found out Friday?" Kyle Shanahan went back and said, "Oh, we didn't tell him on Friday." But that's a situation of where him and Christian could be talking, going, "It's probably going to be you, buddy." And the NFL is probably going to look into this for the 49ers.
They did already, actually.
Oh, did they?
They have already looked into it, and they ruled that there was no wrongdoing. That's one of my biggest issues with reporters on the field talking to young rookie players, because they don't, like, all that adrenaline is flowing, and they just answer questions without running through the thought process of it first. Because I think what likely happened was on Friday, Shanahan and McCaffrey went to Mason and they were like, look, we're not sure if he's going to be good to go, so you need to be ready. You might be starting on Monday. So you need to be prepared to be the RB1. And for him, the mindset you take in that situation is, okay, I'm the starter. I need to prepare to be the starter. And that's the mindset you go into going forward. So then they throw that question at him on the field after, and he says Friday, because that's when he started preparing to be the number one. It doesn't mean that the 49ers as an organization said, yeah,
you're going to be the
CMC's
starter
out as of Friday. That decision wasn't made until game time. But unfortunately, then that falls onto this young guy's shoulders. And I respect him for, in the press conference room after, when they asked him that question again, he goes, you know what? That's why I'm mad. And it's like, dude, you should be mad, because they're taking advantage of you and they're running with it so they can have clickbait articles and boost their own ratings. That's all that was for, and
I will say this, though, as someone who is in the media and does talk to players, that question needed to be asked. And the question was, when did you find out? Because again, everyone at that point was sitting back going, it's going to be Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey. An hour before the game, he could have simply, all they're saying is, well, when did you find out today? Like, it could have potentially been that question, but the question, it wasn't trying to take advantage of him. It was just simply saying, when did you find out? And he said that. And again, people are going to write because that's what he said Friday. Mm-hmm. And again, when more information comes out, then those are situations. So I will not blame the media for this one. This is a situation where I go, there are multiple things that are true in this situation of he was told to be prepared and he was in the adrenaline type moment, while
Yeah.
also the reporter just it's not like they were going, oh, so you found out on Friday, like, oh, when at this point it was, when did you find out?
You're right. Yeah, they weren't leading him with the question or anything like that, and that is their job to find that out. I do understand that. It just frustrates me when it's the young guys, and honestly, I think the more of the blame should probably be put on the 49ers coaching staff and the 49ers PR team. That's something where they probably should have sat down with him at halftime when he was already starting to have a big game, and they should have sat him down and go, look, you're gonna get this question after the game. This is how you need to answer it. You know, that's something that teams need to start doing better for these young guys so
Yep.
they don't get frustrated, because you do this enough and we're going to have a whole handful of Marshawn Lynch's on our hands where they're just like, I'm not answering questions. I'm just here so I don't get fined, is what's going to start happening. They're going to start refusing to talk to the media. You know, in Pittsburgh, we have that. Najee Harris has avoided the media all off season, all preseason, all training camp. Like, he doesn't talk to the media for those very reasons, because he doesn't like the way that questions are structured that are directed towards him.
I would have to look at the questions that are being asked, because again, someone who is in this world
Mm-hmm.
and the questions of media, again, you are a professional athlete, you are paid a handsome amount of money. If you don't like negative questions being asked about you when they are rightfully asked, again,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of stupid questions that get asked. Don't get me wrong. I have asked my fair share. But there's
Oh yeah.
also a point where if a player isn't playing well, and for instance, if Najee Harris, and I'm not saying Najee is doing this, but if
Yep.
Najee Harris is avoiding talking to the media because he doesn't want to hear the criticism, well, tough shit. Tough shit. You
Yeah.
signed up for this.
No, my understanding is he avoids it because he's tired of talking about the bureaucracy side of the team. He just wants to play football and talk about football. He doesn't want to talk about his contract. Has he been talking about it? Has he gotten a contract? Have they offered anything? It's all that stuff. I think that it's the behind the scenes stuff that Najee Harris is like, man, I'm here to play football. My agent deals with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
But
that's where he's coming from. And we've seen some other players that are that way. I was just
totally.
using him as an example that has begun avoiding media because there are some questions he's fine with answering, but at some point you're going to get the questions that you're not in the mood for. And so it's easier to just avoid it altogether than to try and, dodge and weave through the questions you don't want to answer. Because not answering a question when it's posed to you is an answer in itself, and reporters will run with that as well.
Totally. Again,
Yeah.
from the media man here, from the media side,
100%.
it's one of those things of, I have a job to do.
Yep.
You're being paid an exceptional amount of money to play a game. By God, you can answer some questions you don't want to accept. You don't want to find out. Again, there are people in the news world that have to ask really hard questions to people, to families of their kids just getting killed. It's one of those
Yeah.
things, they don't really want to talk about it. You can talk about your contract situation and simply say, listen, guys, I don't know what's happening with the contract situation here at the moment. We're in talks, or this, and that. You can answer these questions. You are being paid millions and millions of dollars. Get out, go fucking do it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah. I think they should all just start answering those questions like Mike Tomlin. Just immediate next question, or I'll answer that on Tuesday, and then don't come to the reporters on Tuesday. Like, it's funny watching Mike Tomlin deal with the media. He is entertaining as fuck.
Yeah. And there
Yeah.
there are situations where I totally agree. There are
Yeah.
ways where there's time and place for certain questions. Again, that Mike Tomlin contract situation right after the playoff game, that was not the time and place to answer that question.
Yeah.
That is not the time and place to do that. But it's, again, I will always lean back to both of these. It's like, guys,
Mm-hmm.
we understand, like, we also have a job to do. We have to ask these questions. So
100%. Yeah. No, I get that, and I do agree with that. It is their job to do it. But I'm just playing devil's advocate, where it's like, I don't blame the players when they opt out, because it's like, you know what? If that player doesn't want to, you have 51 other players on that team, plus the entire roster on the other team, plus 31 other teams in the league. Like, you'll find other people to ask questions to. So if
totally.
you get one or two guys that don't want to deal with the media, so be it. It's just, I'm starting to see it more with the younger players where they get frustrated And so then they just stop altogether until they, I don't know if maybe some of them are taking like classes to learn how to better handle the media. That might be a good thing for some of them
I
to do,
think every
honestly.
single team that brings in a young player needs to have media training because again,
Yeah.
you see players that handle the media a hell of a lot better. Justin Fields in Chicago, he was not ever good with the media. He
Yeah.
gave very short, very bland answers, and it was one of those things where from a media standpoint, you didn't really like him that way. And then there's guys that, for instance, like Caleb, he handles the
Mhm.
media very well. He understands that he's going to get hard conversations, but players need to go through media training if they're going to be at a professional level. And the way with NIL is with college sports, they should be getting that now and
Yeah.
basically saying,
I think
listen,
that may be something we start to see more of actually in college,
I,
which I
I
think will
do
be
as
a
well.
very good thing.
But moving forward, we need to get to some picks predictions here for this upcoming week for number 2. And game number 1 that we are starting out with is the Cowboys taking on the New Orleans Saints, with the Cowboys sitting at -6 on the spread.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game because the Cowboys last week, they were
Dominant.
good.
Yep.
Like they dominated the Browns, which have one of the best defenses in the league coming into this season, and they just looked very good, very polished, very comfortable. Um, the Saints kind of surprised as well. Like we knew they were going to beat the Panthers. The Panthers are garbage, but I don't think any of us expected the Saints to beat the Panthers that easily and that cleanly. Like it was a clean game for the Saints on both sides of the ball. The offense played well. The defense was playing extremely well, which we've said for a couple years now. That Saints defense is sort of a dark horse. They're forgotten about, they're slept on. They are very good. And so this could turn out to be a game, the -6. I'm not sure even what the over under is, but I would expect it to be a high scoring game between these two
Yeah,
teams.
so the score total right now is 46.5.
That to me is a very promising over to take with these two teams playing. If they both play as they did last week, I said it last week, I think Alvin Kamara is set for a big year this year. Um, and you can't discount Dak Prescott, CD Lamb, and Brandon Cooks looked pretty good last week as well. So I mean, maybe they do have a solid number 2. Maybe Cooks is having a bit of a reemergence himself, which could be good. Downside for the Cowboys, I do believe they are now without Jake Ferguson, which hurts some of their over the middle play. If I saw right, he was at least on the injury report. I'm
Yeah,
not
I'm just
sure if
taking a
he was
quick look for you here, buddy.
completely out, but
Yeah,
this is
Jake
going to be a good
Ferguson
game
is
for me.
doubtful for the game.
Yeah, and doubtful often ends up meaning they're not going to play. You don't see guys go from doubtful to playing as often as you do from questionable to playing.
Yeah,
So
questionable is like 50-50. Doubtful is like 85 to like 15 type situation.
exactly. But honestly, I still like the Cowboys in this game. The Cowboys are really good early season team. They always come out hot, and for that reason, I will be taking the Cowboys in this game. That -6, though, I think the Saints will be able to keep it closer than that. To be honest with you, I think it might not be within 3, but I think 4 or 5 points is a little more reasonable. So I'll take the Saints on the spread there.
So for myself, I am taking the Cowboys in this game. I don't think that's going to come as much of a shock to anyone, but I'm taking the Cowboys at -6 on that spread. And here's why. The Saints, we have been talking about this team as being one of the bottom 7 teams in the league this year. They went up against the Panthers and they dominated the Panthers. The Panthers are just a shit terrible organization. They are bad throughout. They took advantage. They were basically a high schooler beating up a toddler. That's what that was. But now this high schooler is going up against a full-grown man. This Cowboys defense, Micah Parsons, we always talk about Derek Carr, and what do we call him for a nickname? It's Poopy Pants. Because the second that he has pressure coming his way, the game is completely different. I think Alvin Kamara is going to be the only player on that offense that actually does anything for the Saints team. I think the defense for the Cowboys is just going to be too much for them. I think the Saints defense is going to try to keep this game a little bit closer, but I think ultimately with the Saints basically just going 3-and-out, 3-and-out, 3-and-out because Derek Carr, second that the ball is snapped, he's running away, filling his pants because Micah Parsons is chasing after him. And I don't think this game is going to be close. I just think, and we see it every single time when Derek Carr goes up against a top tier defense with a top tier edge rusher, and Micah Parsons is a top 5 rusher in the league, he struggles and he panics. And there's a reason we call him poopy pants. So for me, I just have to sit back and I go, I think this is going to be the Cowboys having a pretty comfortable game. Again, they went up against the theoretical number 1 defense in the league last week, and they didn't look like they were that slow. Things were just moving along. The Saints have a good defense. They don't have the Browns defense. And I think this team right now is just going to walk over this Saints team. Next up on our list is the Detroit Lions taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Detroit Lions are plus 7.5.
This has the potential to be probably one of the most fun games this week, honestly. The Bucks looked really fun last week, and that Lions-Rams game on Sunday night arguably was the best game of the week last week. That was just
100%.
so much fun to watch. The Lions, they showed they've got the grit and the toughness to just grind a team out, and I think that's going to end up happening here in this game. It's going to be a bit of a gunslinger shootout, though. You know, Baker Mayfield has been very confident airing it out to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think he'll continue to do so even against this improved Lions defense, and I think he'll be able to be putting some points up against them. 7.5 spread is pretty rich for me, like over a touchdown to win. I don't think that's going to happen. I am taking the Lions on the money line here, but I think the Bucks will cover that spread.
Yeah, I'm taking the Lions on the money line, but I'm also taking the Bucks at that 7.5 point spread. I think Baker Mayfield is truly comfortable in Tampa Bay. I think last year he showed that he had a very good time with Tampa Bay, and they brought him back. They put confidence in him. He's happy. He's comfortable. And when we see Baker Mayfield happy and comfortable, that is when he starts to turn into that Baker Mayfield that we saw at Oklahoma that year that he won the playoff game, where he was cool, calm, and collected, and he has a team where the drama isn't really high. I think this is going to be a tough game for the Bucks because I think the Lions just have that team that is just so explosive on offense. I think their defense, however, is going to struggle a little bit in this game because of what the Buccaneers can do on offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably going to be one of those games where it's going to come down to 1 or 2 points in it. Again, Lions just so explosive on offense. They have a young defense here at the moment that I think the Bucks will be able to take a little bit more advantage of, and I just don't think that Bucks defense is quite as good to shut down this Lions offense quite like what we saw with the Rams, especially with what's happening with Antonio Winfield. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? That's going to be a big factor, but I think the Bucks are going to be able to hang in this game and play a really, really competitive one. I would honestly say this is probably going to be one of the best games of the week to watch.
I agree completely. I mean, especially this Lions team. We've talked about them being sort of like a three-headed dragon with Gibbs, Laporta, and St. Brown. After watching last week, I feel like you can almost add 2 more heads to that in Montgomery and Williams. People forget he was a top pick for the Lions back a few years ago, and then dealt with some injuries, and then
The gambling,
was it a gambling suspension as
yeah,
well?
6-game gambling suspension.
So he missed a lot of time, but we saw it last week. He went off when St. Brown was being shut down, which makes this team so much more dangerous because now opposing defenses are going, oh shit, we can't just double team Amon-Ra and win this game because they got another guy on the other side of the
Yeah.
So this Lions team, this could be their year.
I said this last year. The Lions were the most enjoyable team for me to watch last year. And that's
Yeah.
weird coming from a Chicago Bears fan and saying nice things about the Lions, but they were really so entertaining last year. And they've really just kind of stepped it up again this year.
Mhm.
And as long as Dan Campbell doesn't do Dan Campbell dumb things like what we saw last year, there's no reason to say that this Lions team can't be fighting for that number one spot in the NFC. Taking our next game of the week, it is the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Green Bay Packers, and the Colts are minus 3 points in this one.
Yeah, this is a bit of an easier game to pick now with the Jordan Love injury because we know it's going to be Malik Willis playing quarterback. There's been rumors and whispers of the Packers looking around for another quarterback, possibly. I heard Ryan Tannehill, but nothing's come to light yet. And even if it does in the next 24 hours, they won't be starting this week. So Malik Willis leading this Packers team does not inspire confidence. I know Josh Jacobs is a little beat up as well. He's questionable, and Jaden Reed, I believe, is questionable also, if not even into that doubtful range.
He's
So
still listed as questionable, but funny enough, Jordan Love is listed as questionable.
I know, isn't that weird? Like,
Yeah,
he's not playing. Like, why is he questionable? Like, just put him out. He's not playing. He should be out, not doubt or not questionable. That's a silly designation in my opinion.
I
Um,
agree.
and this Colts team, they looked damn good against
The
was it the
Texans.
Texans they played
Yeah.
last week. So I mean, that's going to be a good rivalry going forward. Anthony Richardson showed again that impressive bomb arm he has, slipping and then still launching at 60 friggin' yards in the air for a touchdown. Like that's scary. Having a quarterback that can just pull that off at any moment, that's scary to defend against.
It's freak of
Um,
nature.
he is, and he played through a complete game. He didn't get hurt. So this is promising going forward. The Colts are my pick in this game. And what did you say the spread was? 6.5?
-3 for the Colts.
Oh, -3. Yeah, they're going to cover that spread too, for sure. I don't think the Packers have enough to be able to keep it that close with all the injuries that mounted up in that Brazil game. It's going to be a bit of a letdown game for the Packers. They'll climb back up out of this. Don't get me wrong, but this will not be a pleasant game for Packers fans. I think the Colts are going to win this one pretty easily.
Yeah, I have the Colts over the Packers in this one, and I also have the Colts covering the spread. What we saw with Anthony Richardson and that Shane Steichen offense last week was impressive against this Texans team. And this is a situation where the Packers, I don't think they have all that great of a defense. I don't think Jair Alexander is a top corner in this league. I don't think they have necessarily the best linebacking core, and I think their edge rushing unit is good, but it's not elite. And I think this Colts team, they just kind of are playing with all sorts of confidence. If Jordan Love plays this week, if he somehow miraculously plays, you're not telling me that, their first round pick is who's an edge rusher. I'm forgetting the name of at the moment. Tiatu Latu, he's not going to just go out there and say, I'm going to hunt, and their entire defense to force Buckner. I'm pretty sure DeForest Buckner's still there. But it's one of those things where they're going to go after Jordan Love. And if it's Malik Willis, you can't tell me you are confident in Malik Willis trying to lead this team. Sure, he's got the starting reps this week, but there's a reason the Tennessee Titans moved on from him pretty much immediately the following season when they drafted Will Levis and said, yeah, we're going to have Will Levis be our starting quarterback and not Malik Willis.
Well, and then it's concerning too that they also went and they signed Mason Rudolph and went, yeah, no, this guy's going to be our number 2 by Malik.
Yeah, and
Like,
immediately traded him.
Exactly. So I mean that is definitely a concern as well. Again, we talked about it earlier. It does take a few years for these quarterbacks to come into their own. Look at Geno Smith.
Mhm.
It was almost 8 years before he truly hit that stride where we were like, okay, he is a pretty decent quarterback. He's what we thought the Jets were drafting back when they drafted him, but
I
they
will
rushed
say,
through it a bit.
I never thought Malik Willis was a good quarterback coming out of Liberty. You
No.
just watched the way that he played.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. I think the hype over his, again, it was the combine, both
Mhm.
on the field and then what happened outside, where he was just such a great guy, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's now a top 5 quarterback." It's like, what are we doing? No,
Yeah.
like he's not a top 5 quarterback, guys. Stop being dumb. And
No, but you don't have to be a top 5 quarterback coming out of college to be successful in this league.
no, no. And I just think he was a guy that was drafted even massively way too high, even in the
Yes.
third round. And
Well,
it's, yeah,
we've been seeing that a lot over the last 5 years. There's been a lot of overdrafting at the quarterback position.
there really is. And again, it's the most important position in sports. So
Mhm.
to overdraft a guy at the most important position in sports is kind of understandable in a way, because if you get that guy and he turns out to be great, then you're not really
Yeah.
going to be too upset. But
Yeah.
yeah, this Colts team right now, I feel like they're riding this wave of high level confidence, and the Packers, they're just dealing with too much being beat up here at the moment, and it's going to be a tough
Mhm.
game for them. Moving forward to the Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans, where the Jets are minus 3.5 point favorites.
This was a difficult one for me to an extent, because we saw what that Titans defense can do. They're very good, and the Titans offense looked good for a period last week. And then on the other side of it, the Jets, they were going up against Juggernaut and the 49ers. So we knew they were going to have some struggles, but I don't think we expected them to struggle that much on offense. There were more drops than I expected to see from an Aaron Rodgers led offense. And that defense just could not corral the 49ers offense. Even so, seeing how the Titans and Will Levis fell apart against the Bears in the second half, I cannot go into this having confidence. And for that reason, I am going to take the Jets here.
Yeah,
I think it'll be sloppy, so I do think the Titans will be able to cover that spread and keep it close, but the Jets will ultimately win this game.
I think the best part of this Titans defense from what we saw last week was Trevon Sweat, Trevon, Trevondre Sweat, there we go, and Jeffrey Simmons are a fearsome D tackle unit on that field. Also having Harold Landry and Arden Key massively help. L'Jarius Sneed, really, really good corner. And they gave a team that had a rookie quarterback fits. This is a guy in Aaron Rodgers who is going to be, he's not going to be phased by a bunch of the stuff. And I think the Jets are going to be a little bit more confident. Again, like what you said perfectly, they are going up against a juggernaut in the 49ers last week. There was a lot of talk about, is Aaron Rodgers even going to be able to play the full game? I just look at this Titans team and I go, it's going to be a rainy day. I don't trust Will Levis, man. From what we saw, the meltdown against this Bears team, and the Bears have one of the best defenses in football, but so do the Jets. The Jets have a really, really good defense. They are going to be able to manipulate the same mistakes for Malik Willis that the Bears were going to be able to, or that the Bears did. And I think for me, I'm choosing the Jets, and I'm taking the Jets to get that 3.5 point spread, because I just don't think that the Titans are going to be able to do something, because we talked about the Titans again being one of these teams that we think could be closer to the bottom, being in that bottom 7 echelon just because of their uncertainty with the offense. The defense is better than I think we ultimately gave them credit for, but this offense is going to struggle, man. And again,
Well, I mean, the fact that their head coach came out after that game and was like, "Man, we should have just punted on 1st and 10 every drive. We might have won this game." Which that in itself, that does not inspire confidence in your offense whatsoever. And
no.
that one still image of Will Levis dropping to his knees, that is already for me a front runner to be like image of the year for this season. That was just so hilarious.
That moment is going to be like the Titans like pain in the ass and like crutch moment that every
Yeah.
team seemingly has throughout the year. Like for me, it's, you just see Cody Parkey lining up to take a kick, and you don't even need to know the rest of the context. You just kind of sit back and go, no, 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 please God, no. Don't show this to me again. Titans fans, they're also going to be seeing that aspect of it as well. They're just going to see Will Levis hands up to the head with a Bears uniform around them, and they're going to go, I can't believe we just watched that. Like that's going to be an embarrassing moment that's going to be shown at basically every single Titans game.
Yep.
Moving forward to the Seattle Seahawks taking on the New England Patriots, and the Seattle Seahawks are minus 3-point favorites in this one.
Yeah, I don't know how the Patriots did what they did last week, but I'd like to talk to Gerard Mayo and have him explain to the Steelers how that happened so that we can see the Bengals lose many more games this year, because that was probably the most embarrassing loss of any team last week, losing to the Patriots the way the Bengals did. I don't think the Patriots have it in them to do it again. On the road this week in Seattle,
No, they're
you
at
got.
Foxborough.
Are they? I thought there was a home game for Seattle.
No, they're at Foxborough.
Are they? Oh, okay. Either way, I don't think the Patriots are going to be able to win this one again. It might be a little closer, not having the 12th man to deal with, but I saw promising things from the Seahawks last week against that Broncos team. The concern is Kenneth Walker. He's dealing with an oblique strain now. If he's good to go and can play healthy, this team is a totally different team. Zach Charbonnet did decent filling in, but he is not as good as Kenny Walker. Like, Walker is a phenomenal running back, and if he's there and healthy, this Seahawks team has a good shot to win a lot of games. And so I do think the Seahawks will win this game, and I do think the Seahawks are going to cover this spread.
I think the Seahawks last week, they kind of walked away sweating. Yeah, sure, they got a 6-point victory, but that is not a game where, if you're a Seahawks fan, you should be proud of. The offense didn't move as well as it really could have moved last week. Again, I'm just pulling up the stats, but this was against a Denver Broncos team that we've been saying all offseason could very well have the potential to be one of the worst teams in the league. Again, a rookie quarterback that no one's super confident in, an offense that doesn't have a lot, a defense that really only has one player, and they barely manage to sneak away with a victory in this one. And again, if Kenneth Walker isn't there, that takes away almost 150 yards of just total offense in this game. So that's a huge amount. And, Geno Smith didn't necessarily have the best day out there. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, was sacked twice. And, the defense for Seattle, they didn't look as good as you would expect a defensive-minded head coach to have that defense playing. With that being said, this is still the New England Patriots. The Patriots aren't expected to be good this year. They're not supposed to be good this year. They walked away with, I think you can only describe it as a historic win against the Bengals. That's really the only way that I can think about it. Rhamondre Stevenson, he was phenomenal. They need to continue to give him the ball. I think this game is going to be a Seattle Seahawks win, but I actually think it's going to potentially be a little bit closer than what we're giving the Patriots credit for. And I think the Patriots are actually going to end up covering that 3-point spread. There's something telling me that the Patriots are almost going to kind of be that Arizona Cardinals team of last year, of where they were just losing games, but they were in there, they were in the fight. Gerard Mayo kind of seemingly has this team just playing with the confidence of it's anyone's game every single week. And I could just be maybe hyping up the Seahawks, or the Patriots just a little bit more from what I saw from the Bengals. And again, the Bengals were terrible last week, but I just think this Seahawks team, I don't want to say they're underestimating what the Patriots can do. I just may be overestimating what I think the Patriots can do after what I saw from week 1. So I'm again Seahawks on the money line and the Patriots on the 3-point spread.
Yeah, and I think that might be what the Bengals did is they underestimated the Patriots, and you may have hit the nail on the head there. Is Jerome Mayo maybe telling this team, it's like, look, we literally have nothing to lose.
Mhm.
We are slated to be a bottom 3 team in this league, and with how bad the Panthers looked, he's like, we're already going to finish better than Panthers after that.
Oh
And
yeah,
it is possible the Bengals, perhaps, even though was only week 1, maybe they were already looking ahead to this week playing the Chiefs. And so maybe
very
that's part of
possible.
what happened there. And then my last thing with the Seahawks is it's a new coaching staff. I think the Seahawks team will look better and better as the year goes on. New head coach, new play caller on offense. So
I agree.
there are going to be some growing pains for that team. So I
Oh,
think they will improve as the season goes on.
totally. I agree with that, but it's one of those things where I just kind of sit back and I go, you're this defensive minded guy, and you did that. You allowed this Denver Broncos team to do that. So we all know my willingness to have a defensive minded head coach and my view on that, and it's not necessarily high, but that is, again, just go back and it's basically every week throughout the preseason I talked about that at some point. So moving forward to the 49ers taking on the Minnesota Vikings, and the 49ers are only minus 4.5-point favorites in this one.
I mean, the Vikings looked good last week. I know they played the Giants, who are absolute dog water, but Sam Darnold looked like he might be able to fill those shoes that Kirk Cousins was wearing last year. You know, he looked good. The only thing I will say is he has got to find a way to use Justin Jefferson more. Justin Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken, was targeted 6 times for 4 catches last week. That is not enough.
Yep.
You need to be targeting Justin Jefferson double digits. You need to be getting close to that 10 mark, if not over, because he will catch 8 to 10 of those. So that is going to be the key for this Vikings team going forward on offense to make sure that is happening. Their defense looked good. But again, this is the 49ers. You know, even without Christian McCaffrey, we saw what Jordan Mason was able to do in that running back spot last week, and I have no reason to believe he won't be able to resume that. This is Kyle Shanahan. Like, we talk about system quarterbacks or system players. Like, Kyle Shanahan is the system we're talking about. Like,
Yes.
he is the definition of a system coach where he goes, this is the way I'm playing the game. I don't care if you're the number 2 overall pick or if you're Mr. Irrelevant. We are going to put the same product out on the field. And he does that consistently. And we will see that again. And the 49ers will win this game. And the 49ers will cover that spread. The Vikings will not be able to keep it that close. We will see some big plays. Justin Jefferson likely will get great fantasy point numbers for people, but they're not going to be able to hang with the 49ers. The 49ers are too good.
We saw the Jets and we've talked about the Jets. I know some people are a little bit higher on the Jets and Aaron Rodgers than others, like myself, than you are, but we saw the Jets struggle against the 49ers last week. The Vikings played the Giants. And we want to talk about the Giants defense or the Vikings defense looking good. They went up against the Giants offense. This was Daniel Jones. This was not like they were going up against elite offense and they just managed to hold them to 6 points. This was the worst quarterback that we have on our list. This was one of the worst offenses that we have on our list. This is just a situation for me where I just sit back and look at it and go, man, Vikings, you should feel happy that you got a win, but it's again like we use that analogy of, oh, you were a high school beating up a toddler. This was a college man beating up a fetus. This is not something that we should even really be looking at from the Giants. The Vikings.
I mean, we did talk about this Giants defense is pretty good. You know, the defense
It's
is
good.
good for New York. So the fact that the Vikings were able to put up 28 points, that is a good thing.
It's a good thing for
Yeah.
sure, but we talk about the Giants defense being good in the sense of their top 15 unit. They have, arguably one of the better defensive line in football with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence. Their secondary is not as great. Their middle linebacking situation. It's basically us talking about their D line in that sense for me. And it's one of those things where most teams are probably going to be able to put up 20 points on that Giants defense anyways. So to me, I just look at this Vikings team and I go, you you are in for a rude awakening going up against this 49ers team. Yeah, they don't have Christian McCaffrey. So what?
Yeah.
Mason's going to come out there and do what he did against an arguably better defense than what you saw. The offense, I'm not worried about what they're going to be able to do against this Viking secondary. That Viking secondary is bad. And then you look at the offensive side of things. Yeah, you have Justin Jefferson, but you don't have Jordan Addison. You don't have your tight end. You have Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, who looked decent. But
Yep.
this is the 49ers that we're talking about. This is a team that is literally the powerhouse of the NFL. They are the best constructed roster in all of football, and they're just going to walk away. I think that -4.5 is insulting for the 49ers. This is like, we don't often talk about teams being 10-point favorites, and whenever we see those, we often look at those and go, man, that's tough to do. This is one of those games where I would have been smashing the 49ers to hit that 10-point spread. The fact that it was only 4.5, again, I just look at that and I go, that's a little bit insulting for the 49ers. So moving over to our next game, where we have the Washington Commanders, speaking of a really bad team, the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Giants briefly in the last little bit, and they're bad, and they're gonna stay bad. We saw some bright spots out of Jaden Daniels last week, running the ball, throwing the ball. He was able to keep himself safe and not get beat up too badly. I mean, against this Giants team, he should easily be able to do that again. The Giants do have a good front 4 to 7, but I think Jaden Daniels will be able to get away from that, and get the ball out. So the Commanders are going to win this. And honestly, no matter what the spread is, the Commanders will cover that spread.
Yeah, last week they had the Commanders had a decently competitive game against the Bucks. They weren't great against the Bucks. This Commanders defense is all sorts of bad. There's
Yeah, it is
no
bad.
real spot where you look at it and go, they have a player. Their D tackles are good, but that's about it. Then you look at their offense. Jaden Daniels, he's a young quarterback who's going up against a good defensive line. I can kind of see where the market is going with this 1.5 of going, you have a really bad team in the Giants, but you also have a young guy in Jaden Daniels who you're not really sure about here at the moment. I just think the Commanders are going to walk away with the victory in this one, and Daniel Jones is going to be Daniel Jones, and until the Giants realize that you can't have Daniel Jones starting as your quarterback, you are going to lose games. And we saw Daniel Jones just completely shit the bed last week. I think he's probably going to have a better game this week against the Commanders, just because that's how bad the Commanders' defense is, but he's still going to throw 2 interceptions, probably. He's still going to be not being able to hit his targets, and so yeah, I have the Commanders winning this game. I have them covering the spread. It's the second that you have the Giants with Daniel Jones as your starting quarterback, unless you're facing the Panthers, it's going to be really hard for me to choose the Giants. Speaking of the Panthers, they are taking on the Chargers, and the Chargers are -5-point favorites.
Yeah, the Chargers surprised me last week. Like, I know Harbaugh is a excellent coach. I knew he was going to be able to get this team rolling. I didn't expect it to look that good that early. Granted, it was probably a little bit more that the Raiders looked bad, but the Chargers were able to take advantage of that and pull out a decent-sized win against the Raiders. And this Panthers team just got absolutely dismantled by the Saints. And I think the Chargers are going to be able to do a similar job here. You know, this will be a good test for experimentation for the Chargers to really figure out, you know, is Lad McConkey going to be our number one? Is it going to be someone else? Like, let's move the ball around. Let's see where Justin Herbert's comfortable. Because even if a mistake is made and a turnover magically happens or something, the Chargers will get it back and they'll be able to just keep rolling. Chargers will win this game. They'll cover that spread. The Panthers will continue on their. Honestly, they look bad enough. This could be an 0-17 season. You know, we could be looking at two winless teams playing in Germany in a few weeks, and oh my god, I feel bad for those German fans watching Giants and Panthers.
I saw someone, an NFL player, tweet out, "What did the Germans do to deserve this game?" And it's like, well,
Yeah, yeah, we know what they did.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins looked unstoppable last week against a Raiders defensive line that we thought was going to be really, really difficult to stop. And right now, the Chargers look like they are in that conversation of having a Detroit Lions, Philadelphia Eagles offensive line of where it might be one of the best in the NFL. Panthers have nothing on defense. They have nothing on offense.
Yep.
Enough said. They have the
Right.
Chargers. Like, yeah, we literally don't have to move the conversation anything more. It's
No.
the Chargers have Justin Herbert, a top 5 quarterback, one of the best offensive lines in football. They have an aging defense that still has Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and the Panthers have, and the Panthers have, and the Panthers
Yeah,
have.
exactly.
Like it's literally like you were to, like if you were to type into Chat GPT, can you name star players for the Panthers? It would just spin in a circle and going calculating, calculating, calculating. Cam Newton. Oh wait, no, he doesn't play anymore. Calculating, calculating. Does Luke Kuechly still play? No, he's retired. Like it is. Daniel Jeremiah made a statement about the Bears last year of where he said the Bears were 10 players away from being 10 players away. The Panthers are 53 players away from being 53 players away. There is
they're bad.
nothing redeemable about this team. Losing to the Saints as bad as you did last week in an embarrassing fashion, like it's not like me looking at the Bears last year at the beginning of the season and go, how are you that underprepared for week 1 and you give that level of performance? This was one of those things where you just go, why are you still in the league?
I know there's a few people been saying that about the Panthers where it's like, man, we need to just relegate this team. They are bad.
You can find games for $2.
Yep.
You can find tickets for $2.
Yeah.
This Panthers,
which is absolutely crazy. And yeah, you said it. J.K. Dobbins went off last week. He's an explosive back. I watched him for a while because he was with the Ravens. And what I'll say is, take advantage of that, whether it's in fantasy or play some bets. Like, utilize J.K. Dobbins while you can, because the issue with him is he will get hurt at some point and he'll be done for this.
Yeah.
It's what he does. He goes too hard and he burns himself down. And so that is a concern for the Chargers. You know, they need to try to mitigate how much they're using J.K. Dobbins if they want him to be there past week 10.
And with that being said, I'm choosing the Panthers to win. No, I'm kidding. Like it's Chargers win, Chargers point spread. This is again another game where I would have looked at and said it's almost insulting to the Chargers that it's only a -point favorite. Again, if this was a +14, I would maybe consider the Panthers for that. But even then, I would still be taking the Chargers on that point spread just because of how bad this Panthers team is. And by me saying this, the Panthers are somehow going to walk away with a historic victory. No, I can't believe that. Jags versus Browns. Jags are 3-point favorites. Tired of talking about the fucking Panthers.
Yeah, no, I feel you there, man. The Jags, they did Jags things last week. They looked really good against the Dolphins in the first half. They're up by, I think it was 17, and then they lost. And it's like, oh, okay, that's the Jags. But They're luckily going up against Massage Watson and the Browns, who can't do shit on offense, despite having Amari Cooper, Jerome Ford, Jerry Jeudy. But you got Deshaun Watson. If he keeps playing worse and worse the way he is, by next season, the Giants will be able to go, hey, we don't have a quarterback anymore. Because Deshaun Watson is rapidly declining as I see it. He doesn't look good. I know a lot of people keep hyping him up before the season start and going, this is going to be his year. But some of the analysts, they say it perfectly. This dude, he has nothing to play for, and you can see it. All of his money is fully guaranteed. He has no reason to have the desire to win or have the desire to do well, because he looks at it and goes, I'm getting over $200 million away. Like, that money's mine, whether I go 0-16 or 16-0. So why should I give a fuck? And you can tell just by his demeanor, by his facial expressions, by the way he carries himself in that Browns locker room and on that sideline, he doesn't care if this team wins or loses, and that's going to hurt the Browns endlessly. The fact that Baker Mayfield looks so much better now than Deshaun Watson, it's a situation that could only happen to the Cleveland Browns. You had your guy. If you had kept Baker Mayfield, you would arguably be a favorite to compete with the Chiefs and the Bengals to be going to the Super Bowl every year. But you decided to let Baker go and spend all your money on Deshaun Watson, and here you are in this endless limbo of mediocrity. You will occasionally have a good season out of pure dumb luck. That is it. The Bengals will lose this game. The Jags will win. The Jags will cover that spread.
The Bengals? You mean the Browns?
Browns. Sorry. Yeah, Browns will. I hate both those teams. I mix them up sometimes. Both
I hear
ugly
you.
orange sweaters.
I hear you.
Yeah.
You were saying about, people talking about and trying to defend Deshaun Watson. Granted, I was one of those people that says I am not ready to give up on Deshaun Watson yet, because when he was playing for the Texans, he was a top 5 quarterback. He was truly one of the best. And to me, I have just never seen someone fall off that bad in their performance. I've seen guys take hits of having off-field issues, coming back, and they're just not necessarily the same. We kind of saw that with Michael Vick from years ago, but even his first few years in Philadelphia, he was still really good. But I have never seen a quarterback be, without an argument or a doubt, a top 5 quarterback in this league to now being exactly what he is. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. He just doesn't care anymore. He knows his contract's fully guaranteed, and it's just whatever. He has 2 more suits that have come out this week against him. It's literally going, what are we doing now, guys? Like, how is this still being a conversation? And I'm at this point now where I'm just going, if you're the Cleveland Browns, just cut the losses and say, here's your money, go away. We don't want you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, go hire your own personal massage therapist and just leave us alone.
Yeah, like
100%.
Like I just don't. I'm mystified at how the descent of Deshaun Watson, because again, I thought he was a top 5 quarterback, and he has just fallen so unbelievably far.
This Browns team, if they cut him and they go with Jameis Winston, I think they're a playoff team. Jameis Winston
agree.
has a better chance of getting this team to the playoffs than Deshaun Watson did. I saw a couple other guys on their podcast this week that they said, you know what? An argument might almost be able to be made at this point that Deshaun Watson is a better human being than a football player.
Yeah.
Now. He might be a better person than player now, which is wild because this dude is
horrible,
a piece of shit.
Yeah. He's a serial sexual assaulter, and somehow he might, like, that was a Barstool podcast that you saw, and it's one of those things you just sit back and you go, it's hard to not agree with that.
Yep.
And that's not a high bar. But with that being said, Jags, I'm taking them to win this game. I'm taking them to cover the point spread. They were really competitive in that Miami Dolphins game. I think with the Browns right now, unless Deshaun Watson just has a miracle and just turns it all around this week, and it's just a completely different human being, and he gets back to being a top 5 quarterback. And just by me saying this, I know none of it's gonna happen. That is literally the only way the Browns win this game.
Even if it does, because it's possible. We see it from every player. He could at some point still have a magnificent game.
Yeah.
He is not going to be able to string it together again. This dude is washed.
Yeah, I just don't know what to say other than it's just an absolute joke at what has happened with this guy.
At this point, the Cleveland Browns and the Carolina Panthers are competing to see which one of them truly had the worst trade in NFL history. Because the Browns gave up a lot.
Well,
not just $230 million. They also gave up, I think it was 3 first-round picks, multiple seconds.
Don't worry, I went through this earlier this week, and we will be talking about that a little bit later in this podcast. So let's just we'll get to that point after we finish our games.
Yep.
But yeah, it's something that I did because I have 3 trades that I want to talk about. That again, moving forward, we have the Ravens taking on the Las Vegas Raiders, where the Ravens are minus 8.5 points favorites in this one.
See, and that is a hefty spread, but I think it's because that Raiders offense looked so poor.
Bad.
It was bad, and from what you said to me, it looked very familiar to you. And so, I mean, I won't say much on this other than the Ravens. I get Harbaugh doesn't want to hand the ball to Derrick Henry 30 times a game. He's older. I get it. You don't need to hand it to him 30 times a game. But when you have Derrick Henry, you got to hand that ball off to him at least 20 times a game. He didn't even get 15 touches in that game against the Chiefs, and that is why the Ravens lost, in my opinion. If you ran, I don't care if you're behind. You got Derrick Henry, you run. If you're going to use him like this, that's the equivalent of being on the 1 yard line and throwing a goddamn slant play instead of handing it off to Marshawn Lynch. That is what the Ravens are doing to themselves if they choose to not use Derrick Henry in the way they should. And that it's simple as that. If they hand it off to Derrick Henry 20 times a game the rest of the season, Ravens are a favorite to go to the AFC Championship. If they do what they did last week, they're not even going to make the playoffs. I don't care how good Lamar Jackson is. This week, however, Ravens will win. That spread is tough, but I think they're going to be playing angry Baltimore because they got embarrassed by the Chiefs, and they will cover that spread. I think they're going to embarrass the Raiders.
Yeah, it's funny how the last 4 games have just gotten us fired up and really annoyed because, again, we were talking about the Giants. We're pissed off with Daniel Jones. We talked about the Panthers, pissed off about the Panthers. Then we're talking about the Browns. We're pissed off about the fucking Deshaun Watson situation. Now we're talking about the Ravens, and it's going, how are you so fucking dense? The move that everyone said would be unstoppable, you are now not doing. What are you doing?
They were so unstoppable. That first drive, I remember messaging you after that first drive last week, and I was like,
this is going to be a problem.
This Ravens team is freaking dangerous. And then they didn't run that option offense the rest of the time, and I don't get it. We you saw what you can do. Do it.
We talked about it earlier in the pod of how we just said, what are you doing? You are a top 5 team. You went up against the team that you lost to in the playoffs. You were the best team in the NFL record-wise. And you went in there with a game plan last year. And then you walked into this game and said, we're not going to run the same game plan. And then ran the exact same game plan. You're a good team. You can get away with that with 90% of the teams in the NFL. But once you get to those 10 teams, it's very different. And again, I'm choosing the Ravens in this one, Ravens point spread as well, because the Raiders, it's Luke Getsy and his offense. The offense is going to look terrible. I think Raiders, they showed me in our little pre-meeting beforehand. I said the Raiders were going to either do two things against the Chargers last week, and one was going to be true. It was going to be the Raiders were going to be consistent on offense and defense and just be a little bit too much for the Chargers on that particular day, or the offense was just going to be so utterly bad that it doesn't even matter with what the defense is going to be, and Luke Getsy is going to fuck the game away from an offensive calling standpoint. And guess what? That's what it was. But getting back to the Ravens and our anger from what this team is doing. You're a Steelers fan. You hate the Ravens, but even you are angry at watching the way that they are operating this team. Yes, Mark Andrews, he needs a few weeks to get back fully healthy. Sure. Isaiah Likely, use him. He was good last year. He was good in that Chiefs game. You're gonna have a great two tight end set. Zay Flowers. Like you signed Derrick Henry to have the most dangerous backfield in the NFL, in the most unstoppable run game, and you give it to him 13 times.
Yeah.
Like, what?
I don't get it. As I said to you last week, like the only thing I can figure out is, maybe on that first drive, they ran a few of those option plays and Lamar Jackson was able to break a few big runs because of it. Because he would hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. Henry would get a big run, and then the defense would be like, oh, right, they got Derrick Henry. We can't just key on Lamar Jackson. And he would get a big run the next time. And it's almost like Lamar was like, oh, I don't need to hand it to Derrick. I can just run it myself all the time. And look at what happened. Like, no, Derrick Henry is there, so you don't have to run it yourself all the time.
You don't need to rush for 16 rushes for 122 yards.
Right? You've had guys like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and they've been serviceable, but they get hurt because they're not as versatile as a guy like Derrick Henry. You can hand the ball to Derrick Henry 20 times a game. He's not likely to get hurt doing that. And so do that. On the flip side of it, being a Steelers fan, don't do it. keep doing what you did last week. But all means, hand the ball off to Derrick Henry less than 15 times every game. Then I won't even have to see the Ravens succeed at all this year.
Again, like what I said, the game plan that the Ravens ran against the Chiefs last week and at the end of the season last year in that AFC Championship game, you will win 90% of your games that way. But there are 10% of teams that you're not going to be able to get away with that. And you are just going to end up losing games because of it.
Yep. And that's just it. If they run that same style of offense and they don't utilize Derrick Henry, they're liable to go 2-4 in their own division this year. Because you play like that against the Steelers or the Browns, you're not winning either of those. The Bengals have a bit of a Swiss cheese defense, so you can play that kind of game and you'll split or even sweep the Bengals maybe. But you're not beating that Browns defense like that. You're definitely not beating the Steelers defense like that. The Steelers already feast on Lamar Jackson. TJ Watt loves playing against him. And so, man, they got to smarten up. Harbaugh is an intelligent coach. He should know better. So I hope to God he's not doing this thing where he's like, oh, that worked really well. We're going to hide that and keep that for the playoffs. Because no, if you've got something that works, use it. You make every team prove they can stop what you're good at. You don't hide it. You don't scheme around it. You don't play these Arthur Smith bullshit games where you decoy your offense because you want to keep this secret. No, you run what works. And handing the ball to Derrick Henry works. I don't care what team you're on. You put that guy on any of the 32 teams in this league, they are better when you hand it off. And that includes the Panthers and the Giants.
Yeah, 100%. Rams taking on the Cardinals. And unfortunately for us, they don't actually give us a spread in this one.
No, this game is a dead heat. There's not even a favorite. It like betting odds, it's like it. You don't see this very often, but the betting line for this game is basically a tie. Yeah. They're expecting these teams to do just as well, and I understand that. I do. I know you're looking like the Rams are way better, but the Rams were good last week. The Cardinals, they had some hiccups, but again, that was game one for rookie Marvin Harrison. Kyler Murray doesn't know all the tricks that Marvin's going to do, all the little off routes he's going to run to get open. But they've had a week of looking at that game tape. I don't think Kyler Murray is going to miss Marvin Harrison Jr. if he gets open deep this week. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Kyler's going to go, oh, I just have to hold on to the ball for 2.5 seconds longer, and then I can sling it for a 45-yard touchdown. All right, I can do that, because if any quarterback can do that, it's Kyler Murray. And so I respect this odds making because I do think this game is going to be really tight. We saw the Rams go to overtime last week with the Lions. I don't know if this one will go to overtime, but I think this game is going to be tight and good. This Arizona offense is good. Trey McBride, we've talked, he could have a breakout season. They still got James Conner in the backfield. They drafted another young running back as well in that backfield, which gives them a good 1-2 punch. And you've got Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. These guys are going to connect. It's going to happen, and I think people are just expecting it to happen really quickly, and I agree with that. I think this is going to be a competitor for the best game we could see this week offensively. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be fun to watch. I do think the Rams will win it because they have a substantially better defense. And with there being no spread, last time I checked, it was a 1-point spread.
Yeah,
But that could have definitely shifted.
it just shows Arizona off, so it's just even at the moment.
Yeah, and so honestly, with there being no spread, that doesn't matter. I think the Rams will win this game. It'll be close. It'll be fun. This is going to be a good competitive.
See, I'm sitting back here going, I think the Cardinals are a much better improved team this year. They have a lot of talented youth coming in. But I think people are forgetting just how good the Rams are. We saw exactly what the Rams did against arguably the second best team in the NFC that's going to be competing for the number one best team in the NFC with the Lions. They took them all the way to overtime. It was a back and forth game. It was a tight game. They gave the Lions fits. Their offense gave the Lions defense fits. I don't think the Cards are even close to Lions offense or Lions defense. And I think right now, again, the Cardinals having defensive minded head coach, know my philosophy on that. It's one of those things where Sean McVay, I don't think this is going to be too much of a game for him. This Rams offense, it is very good. Sure, they don't have Puka Nacua. They still have Cooper Kupp. Kupp and Matthew Stafford went off last week. And that was against a Lions team that had a much better secondary than the Cardinals did. They had a much better defensive line than the Cardinals did. And we look at what the Lions offense did against the Rams. The Cardinals don't have that level of offense. Sure, they have Marvin Harrison Jr., who we think is going to be exceptional in this league. But right now, he's not Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's not Jamison Williams. Then you look at the running back room. James Conner isn't David Montgomery. He's not even close. Then you look at Trey Benson. He's not Jahmyr Gibbs. That offensive line for the Cardinals is not the Lions' offensive line. I just continue to sit back and I go, I would be insanely shocked to see the Cardinals win this game. I think they played a very competitive game against Buffalo last week. But then again, Buffalo is also a team that is in a retooling stage at the moment, and they really worked with them. But this is a Rams team that they have the pieces there that can push them to a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. I think they have the defense for it. They without a doubt have the offense for it. And I just think the Cardinals right now, the bet makers are, I think, putting a little bit too much praise on what they did with the Bills the week prior to, and they're putting too much disrespect on what happened with the Rams last week with the Lions.
Yeah, I hope it's not the disrespect side towards the Rams. Like, this Cardinals team, though, we talked about it every week last year. They were the worst team in the league last year. And they got better. And the fact that, like, they hung with the Bills last week. It wasn't until Josh Allen
Took
went
over.
and was like, "Oh no, I'm winning this game. We're not losing to the Cardinals." And the Bills have so far in the 2 games we've seen, like they seem to be a team that whether they've got superstar talent or not, Josh Allen is like, we're putting up 30 points a game, no matter what. And so that's going to be tough for a lot of teams to compete with. And
Mhm.
the Cards hung with them. And that's all I'm saying this week is I think the Cardinals will be able to hang with the Rams, but they won't be able to close against the Rams. The Cardinals are not anywhere near as good as the Lions. They're not as good as the Rams, but they have the firepower to push these teams to be better. Is what I'm seeing, and
I would
that's
agree
all I
with
think.
you on this one if this was a team that wasn't like the Rams. Like let's say this was a team like the Jags. I would 100% agree with you, but this is a team with the Rams that genuinely went toe to toe in a heavyweight prize
Mhm.
fight and just walked away with a split decision loss.
Yeah, I mean the difference is like the I don't see a way the Cardinals can beat the Rams, whereas like a team like the Jags, I could see the Cardinals pulling an upset against a team like the Jags. I don't
Totally.
see them upsetting the Rams.
Yeah, no,
That
for
like
me the only
hands
thing
down
that
those
I'm upset about is the point spread. I think it's
fair.
disrespectful to the Rams to have it an even spread right now. Like I genuinely sit back and I go, what are we talking about? Because again, like I'll go back to the analogy of a prize fight. This is two world champions going at each other, and one guy just ends up winning by split decision, and that guy for his next fight he goes up against a C-level fighter, and they're going, you know what? Just because he lost his last fight, and this guy competed against a B-level fighter and still ended up losing. Yeah, they're definitely evenly matched. I am just baffled. I agree with you a ton with what they're saying, with what you're saying about the Cardinals, but to me I just go, this is just disrespectful to the Rams in my opinion.
Yeah, the fact that you found the no point spread whatsoever. When I saw it at 1, I was like, okay, I think it'll be close enough that the Cardinals could potentially keep it under a field goal difference. But yeah, the fact that there's no spread whatsoever right now is, yeah,
If
that's a strange one. Like I said, you don't see that often at all where even
no,
the bettors are going, well, it's likely to be a tie, which is just strange.
if I had to put a point spread on this game, I would feel comfortable probably throwing a 4.5 for the Rams.
No.
Like for me, I would look at that and I go, yeah, I'm comfortable with 4.5. If it was 6, I would probably lean a little bit closer to the Cardinals. But for me, that it's just going back to that this is an even spread right now where I just go, like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
So moving forward to your game this week, where we have the Steelers taking on the Donkeys, and the Steelers are currently 2.5 point favorites.
Yeah, and going into Denver, it's always tough to play in Denver. Um, it sounds like it's going to be Justin Fields. That's
Yes.
what Mike Tomlin has said, but Russell Wilson also is not listed on the injury report. So, there's speculation of, is Mike Tomlin playing mind games by not having Russell Wilson there, making Sean Payton wonder if Russ will be, if not starting, but active and playing potentially throughout the game, or what's going on there. That's bizarre to me. Um, Beyond that, with the way the defense played last week, with what I saw out of Bo Nix last week, I think the defense is going to resume their feasting on a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, and they're going to make his life hell. It's likely going to be an ugly game again. I hope we can see a Steelers offensive touchdown. I said it last week. 6 field goals a game, great. You're that Steelers team is going to be able to win a lot of games. But if we can turn even one of those field goals into a touchdown, or two, if 2 of those become touchdowns every game, and we still are getting 3 or 4 field goals, this Steelers team has the potential to win every game this year because they are that good on defense. It's just a matter of getting the offense to a point where they can score a touchdown or 2 every game consistently without turning the ball over. If the Steelers win this turnover battle, which I think they will, they win this game. With how they played last week, it's tough for me to say if they'll beat that spread, but I think they will. I don't think the Broncos are going to be able to keep it under a field goal in the differential here. I think the Steelers win this. It's likely going to be something like a 17-6 final, somewhere in around there.
Yeah, I also have the Steelers winning this game, but it is really really hard to go in and play at Mile High. Like
Yeah.
the Broncos, they just have that unfair advantage where they practice up there all week. They're used to it. They don't have an issue with it because they're acclimatized to it. The Steelers are only going to be there for a day and a half, or they're going to get there, today, and then they're playing tomorrow. That is not enough time to get adjusted to that altitude. And we always see defenses, particularly the defenses, struggle to stay out there, especially if their offense isn't giving them a lot of break time. And again, like I said, I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw from the Broncos last week. I know it's a weird thing for me to say this because I always make fun of the Broncos, calling them the donkeys. But this is one of those things where they performed a lot better against a team that I thought should have been that way. But again, the Seahawks defense is not the Steelers defense. I think at this point we can comfortably say the Steelers have the best defense in the NFL. I think that would be fairly comfortable to say after 1 week of play. I think the Steelers defense is going to get after Bo Nix. He's going to have more rookie mistakes, and people are going to start to question whether or not Bo Nix should be the starting quarterback for the remainder of the season, and that's a whole different conversation. But the other conversation here is the Steelers offense going to do enough to get them at a high level? And again, this Broncos defense did a lot better than I would have given them credit for last week because they had to go up against some guys. Like, again, Geno Smith is by no means a slouch at quarterback. He's not, an amazing quarterback, but not a slouch. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Again, the running back duo that they have there in Seattle. You just look at this, for instance, Steelers offense, and you go, okay, you have George Pickens, you kind of have Najee Harris. Pat Freiermuth is a decent tight end when he's healthy. Anyone else? Anyone else want to raise their hand? No? Okay, we're cool. And I look at Pat Surtain and I go, he is going to be able to shut down George Pickens. And it's going to be someone else that has to step up for the Steelers offense. And that's where it gives me a little bit of concern. I actually have the Broncos covering this spread just because I think, again, the defense is going to start to get tired up in that altitude. We see it happen to every single defense. And I just look at it and go, with Pat Surtain basically saying to George Pickens, you're not going to have a day today, buddy. You might as well just stop. You might as well just go sit on the bench because you're probably going to have the exact same amount of stats there anyways. It's going to be a situation where the Steelers offense, with some of those lackluster players, someone else is going to have to step up. And I don't know if Pat Freiermuth is going to be able to be such a game wrecker in this game from the tight end spot to really make it that much of a difference. And I think Chris Boswell is probably going to have a very similar type of game. And with that being said, I think that's why we're going to have this game be so close, and it's going to be Broncos covering this 2.5 point spread.
Yeah, like I said, the spread was a difficult one for me to decide on this game. And, you said it best. Pat Surtain is going to shut down George Pickens in the same way Joey Porter is going to shut down Cortland Sutton. And that's both of these teams. It's going to be the same thing. It's like, who else can step up on this team? And I think it's going to come down to the running backs. Is Najee Harris going to be able to go off? Or is it going to be
Javonte Williams?
Devontae Williams, yeah. So which one of you is going to be able to get it going? And I have a lot more confidence in that Steelers D-line than I do in the Broncos D-line.
Oh,
I've seen a lot of people talking.
100%.
That Steelers D-line can be argued as one of the best, if not the number one in the league right now.
Yeah, it's hard for me to necessarily disagree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Next game coming up here is the Chiefs taking on the Bengals, or the Bungles,
Yeah.
as we kind of have to put them back from their rightful title after what happened last week.
What I always call them. Even when they're a 13-win team, they're still the Bungles to me. Um,
and they
yeah, like
and
I
the
said,
Chief
it's
and the Chefs
possible they
are
were.
a 6 point favorite.
Yeah, and so they should be. They beat the Ravens last week, and the Bengals lost to the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
The only hope the Bengals have is that it was, as I mentioned earlier, they were already looking ahead to this game with the Chiefs, going, well, you know, Patriots should be an easy win. We need to worry about the team that we hope to be playing in the AFC Championship.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, this is going to be a fun, competitive game. If Joe Burrow is struggling like this because he's not completely healed yet from that wrist surgery, this Bengals team is in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Xavier Worthy last week. He was lights out. We didn't
3
see a lot
touches,
of
2
Travis,
touchdowns.
right? But I mean that if that's all he needs, if you only if it's a matter of, oh, okay, well we're down by 3 points. We need to get this. Oh, just give it to Worthy. He'll get a touchdown every time we give it to him.
Yep.
Like it's
It's
like a cheat
insane.
code at
Yep.
that point. And then Rashi Rice looked good. And from the sounds of it, that court case of his isn't until June next year. So he will be here all season now. He's not going to face suspension this year. So Rashi Rice is just going to get better. Unfortunately, they have put Hollywood Brown on the IR with that shoulder injury or chest injury. I can't remember which, but they didn't seem to miss him last week. That just means that when he does show up, he's going to get better. We didn't see a whole lot of Travis Kelce last week. We're going to see more this week. This Bengals defense is not good.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were letting the Patriots kind of do their thing against them. Like that. Even if Burrow is on point, he's going to have to throw 3 touchdown passes to Jamar Chase because T. Higgins is on that injury report. He's not going to be 100%. Their tight end room is not anything special. Zach Moss didn't look great in his debut with them. It's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Yep.
They have to beat the Chiefs by themselves, and I don't think they can. I think the Chiefs win this game. I think they cover that spread. We might see some flashes out of the Bengals. It might be close at one time or another, but I don't think it'll be close as we get into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I look at that Bengals team and I go, this is a really, really rough week 2 opponent to come and face, especially going to Arrowhead, especially with what happened in week number 1 with the Patriots. You just look at this and you go, you need to show something. Otherwise, you might as well just pack it in this season. And it's really unfortunate that it has to be the Chiefs. But one thing that we do know is that the Bengals are one of the only teams in the NFL that can compete with the Chiefs. And that being Joe Burrow. And I think he's not fully 100% healthy. He wasn't. I think it was fairly clear. Jamar Chase, I still think, was getting his legs underneath him in that game because, again, not doing anything in preseason is not a good thing to have happen. It really feels like like I said, the Bengals need to show something this week. They need to go out there and put a competitive game up on tape for people to look at them and say their season isn't just going to be a waste. Because if they just go out there and they get absolutely blown up and just bulldozed by this KC Chiefs team, it's going to be a situation where we're going, you know what? Maybe it's time to just say, hey, Joe, take the season off, get that fully healthy. Jamar, we're going to pay you the money. You might as well just stay healthy this season, and we're just going to try to get a top pick because, again, we're going to trade away T. Higgins at the or at the midway point. We're going to get a bunch of picks. We'll have a bad enough pick to the point where, maybe we go out there and we get a Travis Hunter who can play both corner and wide receiver. There's a lot of different stuff that they could do. I do think the Bengals, they're going to come out with a vengeance, because I think they are going to say to everyone they're going to come and play. And you put it best. They might have just been looking forward a week as opposed to looking at the opponent right in front of them last week. And they kind of just laid a goose egg down on that situation. So I do have the Chiefs winning this game, but I do have the Bengals covering the spread in what should be a fairly close game. And from someone who is a big fan of Joe Burrow, I want to see this game close, because in the AFC, he's the only one right now that has proven that he can beat Mahomes. You kind of hope that CJ Stroud could potentially be that type of guy. You don't know. The only guy that really can give you that confidence, right, not just in the AFC, in the entire NFL, is Joe Burrow. So if you are tired of watching this Kansas City Chiefs team just dominate all over the place like what they have been, you have to be rooting for Joe Burrow. I know, for instance, you won't be rooting for the Bengals, but at some point
I'd rather see a three-peat than the Bengals.
fair enough. But like, it's one of those things. If people want to see Mahomes be taken down, this is the guy to do it. And
100%. And I mean, even with how much I hate the Bengals, I will say this: they're like the inverse of what we talk about with the Dallas Cowboys. We say the Cowboys, they start every season strong, and then they start to fall off at the end. The Bengals and Joe Burrow often have this issue where they start seasons very slowly, very badly, and then after about week 4 or 5, they just don't lose again.
Yeah.
And that seems to be their MO. And so even if they get blown out by the Chiefs here, I still will not write them off and go, well, there's no chance they'll make it, because Joe Burrow's that guy.
Yep.
The concern right now, and a lot of people are talking about it, is Joe Burrow is beginning to take this trajectory where he's going to start getting labeled as Andrew Luck 2.0.
Yes.
And that is a big concern for Cincinnati, because they've got all their hopes and dreams in the Joe Burrow bandwagon. And if he can't get it done, suffers more injuries, walks away, anything like that, that immediately puts the Cincinnati Bengals back into that spot of
they're just the Bungles.
They're in the basement and they're trying to find their future again.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. Sunday Night Football. Texans taking on the Bears. Texans are 6.5 point favorites.
Yeah, the schedule makers have done a good job. Last Sunday night game was so fucking good. That Rams-Lions game. I hope this is the same. This is the game I wanted to see for the Hall of Fame game. CJ Stroud, last year's Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, sorry, and this year's #1 overall pick quarterback. So Caleb Williams against CJ Stroud. Caleb arguably has the better weapons around him. CJ Stroud, however, has much more chemistry and familiarity with the team around him.
Yes.
And Joe Mixon last week looks like he fit in so well into that Texans offense. That just makes that running game much more fearsome, which makes CJ Stroud more comfortable, more confident in the pass game. The Bears are still growing. As much as I would love to pick the Bears here because it would be an exciting story, and I hope this game is close and competitive throughout, I want to see an offensive shootout here. The Bears defense might be able to mitigate that a little bit. They have a much better defense, but the Texans are no slouch on D either. We don't talk about their defense because CJ Stroud is that guy right now. So it's hard to tell whether this is going to be big offensive battle or big defensive battle. Either way, I hope it stays close. I have the Texans winning, but I do think the Bears are going to be able to keep it close enough to cover that spread.
Yeah, I'll come out right and say it. I think the Texans are going to win this game. I think I've thought ever since the schedule came out that the Texans were going to win this game.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a much closer game. The reason being is I think that Bears offense last week, they sat back and said that shit wasn't good enough. even Shane Waldron, the Bears offensive coordinator, came out this week and said, "I'm going to be better. I wasn't good enough." And it almost made me cry to hear a Bears offensive coordinator actually take responsibility, because we haven't had that. And whenever we have had an offensive coordinator take responsibility, it was almost like he had a gun in his back going, "Just say you weren't good enough. Come on, Luke Getzey." And like that's kind of what it felt last year. Like with Shane Waldron this week, when he's like, "Listen, I wasn't good enough. I didn't put our players in good enough position. I didn't do this, and that. I need to be better, and I will be better." And this, I sit back and I go, that is what I want to hear. A coach taking some responsibility. There's going to be some question marks for the Bears offense this week, because Keenan Allen and Romo Dunze are both questionable. Rome is probably going to end up not playing this week, and Keenan Allen, I think he is going to play, but if neither of those two guys play, that's going to be a big question mark. But you still have DJ Moore. I still think DJ Moore is better than every single one of the receivers that the Texans have in Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, and why am I forgetting Nico Collins. It's one of those things. I still think DJ Moore is good, and honestly, I wouldn't be upset for Caleb Williams to basically go, "Okay, I only have DJ Moore this game. I'm going to force DJ Moore, because I don't think Derek Stingley Jr. is going to be capable of covering DJ Moore." I think Derek Stingley Jr. is an amazing corner. Don't get me wrong. I just think DJ Moore is just he's that guy. I think the Bears offense will be better this week. I think we'll see improvement from Caleb. The biggest thing for me in this game is that I don't think this Texans team is quite ready for this Bears defense. The Colts have a good defense, and the Texans had some struggles. The Bears, they can stop the run. Sure, they didn't do a great job at stopping the run in the first quarter last week. The second quarter, tell me how many times Tony Pollard broke free. Tell me how many times Will Levis did anything. It was a Chicago Bears defense that walked out of the first quarter of that, or the first half of that game, and said, "All right, enough fucking around, guys. Let's play this game properly." And it was, "Oh no, the Bears have their defense." And I think Jalen Johnson, he is the number one corner in the league. He doesn't matter who he's covering, they're not going to have a good time. Tyreek Stevenson, he was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week last week. He very, very good. I think this Bears defense is going to make this game for the Texans incredibly, incredibly difficult. And for that reason, I think it's going to be very close. And so I have the Texans winning this one, but I have the Bears covering that 6.5 point spread. And I think that 6.5 point spread is almost a little insulting to Chicago. And I think I understand why it is that way, because they're looking at it going, well, the Bears offense did this. I don't think that's indicative of what the Bears offense is going to look like the entire season.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I feel like maybe the reason for such a large spread is those questionable tags on Keenan Allen and Romo Dunze as well.
yeah,
I do hope Keenan Allen can play this week and redeem himself a bit,
me
because
too.
that was a lot of uncharacteristic drops from him last week. Like, Caleb Williams should have had a touchdown last week. That was in Keenan Allen's hands, and that is not a pass that he drops 99.9% of the time.
Exactly.
That was very unlike him. And so I would like to see him have the opportunity to redeem himself now, for sure.
For our Monday night game, it is the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Atlanta Falcons, and Philly is favored by 6 points in this one.
Yeah, the Eagles might be much like the Packers, feeling a little bit tired after that trip to Brazil and back. That's a hefty flight to go through. They're not quite as banged up as the Packers were, though. I haven't looked at their injury report, so I don't know if they're having any issues, whether it's Saquon Barkley or anything like that, because, we do know Barkley has an injury history. Either way, that Eagles team looked good in Sao Paulo when they played that game. And the Falcons, I don't think Kirk Cousins is ready to be back from this injury. And even if you sidestep away from that and go to Michael Penix, I don't think you like that? Yeah, I don't think he's ready to start.
Yep.
It's the Falcons have a lot of firepower on offense. They have a good defense. They improved a lot on defense this offseason. Added a lot of key pieces, It's not going to be enough. The Eagles are going to win this game. You've got too many explosive players. It doesn't matter. It can be Saquon Barkley. It can be A.J. Brown. It can be Devontae Smith. It can be Dallas Goedert. Hell, it can just be Jalen Hurts doing it all himself. This offense will find a way to score points. And then the defense, it's such a good defense. The front seven is solid. They're big. They're strong. It's the Georgia Bulldogs defense, basically. And they're going to impose their will on Kirk Cousins. They saw how the Steelers shut him down, and I'm sure they will do the same thing. They will get pressure after him and just tight man coverage against Drake London, and that takes away everything. Kyle Pitts might be able to get some stuff done. Bijan Robinson, maybe he'll catch some passes out in the flat. Beyond that, they're not going to be able to sustain an attack long enough to hang with this Eagles team. Eagles will win this game. They'll cover that spread. The Falcons, who were hopeful coming into this year with a new, $100 million guaranteed quarterback, are going to slowly start looking at this and going, oh shit, we might be the worst team in this league outside, or in this division outside of the Panthers.
Yeah, I think the Eagles, they do have A.J. Brown listed as questionable, but I'm not too worried about that. I think he's going to end up playing. But the Falcons last week, this was a team that I expected so much more from against the Steelers. And they laid a dud. They laid a turd on that game. And the Steelers, if you were going to look at both of those two games, the Steelers and the Eagles, I think 99% of people would have said, which is the more winnable game? Everyone would have said against Steelers. I think everyone would have. Because the Eagles are probably the second best constructed team in the NFL, only behind the 49ers. And people might argue that they are the best constructed team in the NFL. So the Falcons, they're going to be in for a very, very rough day in Philadelphia because it is in Philly. And this team has had since Friday to kind of rest. So it's almost like a mini bye week for them. They played on Friday, traveled back on Saturday morning, got back, was able to rest up a little bit. And then they just had to completely focus on Kirk Cousins and this Falcons team. And either one of those quarterbacks, Michael Penix or Kirk Cousins, I don't think either one of them is going to be capable enough of actually getting this done over the Eagles. So I have the Eagles money line and in that 6-point spread.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. If you put the Falcons up against the Steelers and then the Eagles, which is the more winnable game, pretty much everybody had the Falcons winning that game last week. I think I only saw maybe 3 or 4 people out of all the analysts, all the sportscasters that actually picked the Steelers to win. And the Falcons were not able to get it done there. And if you can't get it done against a team where you're favored, you're definitely not going to get it done against a team that is favored to possibly be going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, a team that is favored to destroy you.
Yeah.
And so that is our game picks, because remember, we come out with all of our Thursday reactions, and if there's ever a Friday game or a Saturday game, those will all be posted individually later down the week. So make sure to stick around to the channel and check out those videos when they come out. Typically come out about Wednesday morning-ish is when we're typically going to be looking at this. And as we typically do after all of our game predictions, we also talk about our top 5 teams and our bottom 5 teams in the NFL. As per usual, we will start with our bottom 5 teams. And we have 3 new entries into our list for the bottom 5. And coming in at number 28, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. We felt this team was like, you just laid a goose egg. You should not have lost to the Patriots. The Patriots were our 30th team last week. They have now moved out of this list because they did something insanely shocking. The Bengals, this was a team that had the highest odds to win their game.
Yep.
And they just couldn't do it. This was a rough week for the Bengals. They could easily climb themselves out, even with a loss this week. Even if they lose against the Chiefs, they can find themselves climbing out of this spot. But after that game in week number 1, you have to put the Bengals into the bottom 5 with just that terrible performance.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, Bengals were bad. That was upset of the year at this point. I don't see any that could rival that at the moment, even just looking at what schedule's coming up. So that's going to change. At 29, we have a new addition as well, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. They also just looked abysmal against the Chargers team that don't really have an identity yet. And so that was very disappointing. It was, Luke Getsy calling his horrible offensive playbook. You said it. You don't know how he got another job. It would have been like Matt Canada getting another job. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But if this keeps going for the Raiders, Luke Getsy might be hanging out with Matt Canada after this season.
Yeah, the Raiders. This was a team that just simply, like I said earlier, they really had two philosophies. It was going to be they just play consistent all day long against the Chargers, and it's just going to be a little bit too much for that kind of rebuilding / retooling team, or they were just going to lay a complete egg, and they were going to be that bad, and they were that bad. At our 30th spot is also a brand new team, and that's the Cleveland Browns. This is a team that when we talked about them earlier, it was almost like we didn't even talk about the actual game prediction. It was just the frustration from this team and the stupid moves that they constantly seem to be making that just keeps ruining their franchise. And with Deshaun Watson just seemingly just not caring and this number 1 defense from last year looking bad, you just have to throw the Cleveland Browns into the bottom 5 because, again, that was an embarrassing loss.
Yep. Yeah, they should have been able to hang with the Dallas Cowboys more than that, and they didn't look good. Honestly, that defense, it looks like they're still exhausted from everything they had to do last year.
Yeah.
And that's what it is it's Myles Garrett and why am I forgetting some of the others? But either way, they all look tired. They look like they don't have their hearts in it.
Yeah, they looked
then
bad.
They did. They look bad. And so those are 3 new additions. It should be no shock to anybody. 31 and 32, we're just going to run through them quick here. Same 2 as last week. We don't need to talk about them anymore. We already ranted about them earlier. That's the New York Giants at 31, Carolina Panthers at 32. Both dog water. They are going to be competing for the number 1 pick this year.
Yeah, it is. Both of those teams are pretty embarrassing. Like with the Giants, we expected them to be bad. Most of our anger comes from Daniel Jones being their starting quarterback and how much money they're giving them. The Panthers, at this point, just put Alabama or actually just put Georgia in the NFL.
Right, or one of the best teams from the
XFL or
XFL
USFL
or the USFL, whatever it is now. Right, it's getting bad. And honestly, it's not just about the Daniel Jones contract with the Giants anymore. It's that front office as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they let Saquon Barkley walk over to a division rival and
do
sign a
what he did.
contract.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
Yep.
Absolutely terrible decisions by this ownership group, by this management. Changes need to be made in New York so the football Giants can become a great organization again. They used to have
respect,
integrity. They do not have integrity.
They don't. Yeah, you're right. They don't have it. They need to go to Colorado, meet Randy Marsh, and gain some integrity back because it's embarrassing. Our top 5, we only have 1 new addition into our top 5, and it's really only 2 changes. Again, rattling off Chiefs at number 1, 49ers at 2, Lions at 3. Those are all very self-explanatory. All looked very, very good and competitive in their games. No reason to move them down in the list. No reason to move them up in their list. So at number 4, we have a team that was still in the top 5 last week, and that is the Houston Texans, going from their 5th spot to their 4th spot. Again, a tough game against the Indianapolis Colts, but they went out there and did exactly what they needed to do. We saw CJ Stroud basically show up and say, I'm not going to have a sophomore slump. This is my team. And they didn't deserve to drop out of this list. And the team that we did drop out, which obviously is the Ravens, because they were 4 last week, they are no longer on our list, and they are replaced by the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, our new number 5 is the Dallas Cowboys. They were incredibly impressive against what was slated to be a top 3 defense going into this season in the Cleveland Browns, and they absolutely dismantled the Browns. They made it look easy. You know, they announced Dak Prescott's new contract before the game, which definitely takes a lot of pressure off the organization. CeeDee Lamb is locked up now. Dak Prescott is locked up now. All they have to worry about going forward is Micah Parsons. And so that is a big relief to only have that one contract, and I believe they still have one more year with him anyway before they have to worry about it.
Yeah, he's on his 4th year now, and he has the 5th year option picked up. So yeah.
And so that almost felt like what it was. It was like a weight was lifted off this Cowboys team, and they went out there and they were like, there's nothing behind the scenes we have to worry about. Let's go out there. Let's ball. You know, as Dak Prescott says many, many times a game, let's go. And that is pretty much what the Dallas Cowboys did, and they looked good. You know, they always do at the start of the season, but they looked very good. And if they can maintain this consistency, they could be competitive as we get into December and January.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen with this Dallas Cowboys team going forward at the end of the year. Again, a lot of discussion is going to be made with Micah Parsons about what his situation is going to be with the Cowboys, but we did have a segment that we wanted to talk about with some of the worst trades, but we are at about 2 hours and 15 minutes at this point, so we're probably going to turn that into its own separate video at some point this week, because I do think it is important for us to talk about. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying thank you all very much for watching here on the OneIQ Football Talk podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. But for us, saying peace, and we'll see you next time.